and gender nexus, policies and financing for a locally led approach. Just to mention, if you use the headset to channel 18, you will be able to hear me slightly better and the speakers. And also channel 19 is for the translation, if you need translation into English or French. Great. So my name is Leah Moss. I'm a senior policy strategist at Mama Cash, which is an international women's fund based in Amsterdam. And we're one of the 3 founding members of the Global Alliance for Green and Gender Action, which some of you may know as GAGGA, which we lead together with both ends and the Fondo Centroamericano de Mujeres. So GAGGA is an alliance that advances gender and environmental justice by supporting women-led community-based organizations globally who are on the front lines of climate action. They work on adaptation, on mitigation, and addressing the systemic injustice that lies at the root of the climate crisis. We seek to bridge the gap between climate finance and the local organizations who are driving these transformative solutions, from protecting forests to restoring ecosystems, securing food sovereignty and land rights, and overall strengthening climate resilience. Our network consists of community-based organizations, but also of women's funds, feminist funds, and environmental justice funds, who are really key to ensuring that we can drive direct and accessible funding to these local organizations who are doing such vital work. So since 2016, when GAGGA started, we have built up a network over time of 2,300 organizations across 60 different countries. And we've also managed to strengthen cross-learning and collaboration at this intersection of gender and environmental justice. But better than me explaining, we have a short video that I wanted to show that explains a bit some of the partners GAGGA works with. I can't get to the next, oh, there we go.
Esse então é território matricial, advém de mulheres de luta.
First, we have to understand their situation.
We might be accessible to 30% of water, but it's not clean.
Na iliu, sarawa-rawa. Rangai ngabango rasaku ne nangat satong tentang tu ngabango wana bititi.
Empreendimentos que vêm, achando que essa terra está desocupada ou não é de ninguém, para extrair alguns minérios, areia, pedra.
We started with the elders, who are the custodians of the culture.
We have to go to the women's group to get their indigenous knowledge, their climate resilience capacity.
Herdei das minhas mais velhas, das iguais a mim, essa sede também do lutar, do proteger, do cuidar.
Sane mami kere chungayani ke mami bondolo mani ke mami romodi neroni vale leita que na benuzi tu na nonda vura.
Se a gente não pensar na nossa emergência climática, se a gente não pensar em racismo ambiental,
We want these women to be every decision-making table.
Know their stories before taking the next step to finding the solution.
Great, thank you. And yeah, apologies to the speakers, I didn't think about this beforehand. So we're really delighted to be here with the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Thank you for hosting us at the Pavilion, and we're very grateful for this ongoing collaboration. And this event focuses specifically at the nexus of conflict, climate and gender. It's an area of growing importance to GAGGA, so us at the Alliance, but I think to many of us as we adapt to the poly-crisis facing our movements. But often when we talk about this nexus, it's kind of restricted to academic discussion and policy frameworks, and it's detached from the experiences of those who are actually living the impacts of it firsthand. So our new research, Women on the Front Lines, which was supported by the UK FCDO, It seeks to change this by shifting the perspectives to conceptualize the nexus through the eyes of women, and specifically women environmental human rights defenders around the world. Our research shows us that the struggles of gender injustice, conflict, and the climate crisis are not separate but deeply entangled, reinforcing systems of oppression while also generating spaces for radical resistance. Women environmental human rights defenders are forging solutions that challenge the dominant paradigms of exploitation and extractivism, and leading strategies of transformation, demonstrating that the fight for land rights, gender justice, and climate solutions cannot be separated. Today we will share more on this research, and we will also with our panel explore experiences and best practices for addressing this nexus in more detail, and particularly to unlock and scale up finance for gender just and locally led approaches. And our panelists will bring a wealth of experience from Andes in Argentina, Women in Environment Program in Burkina Faso, Climate Watch in Thailand, and the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I will first hand over to Maggie Charnley, who is the head of the UK government's International Forest Unit, to open the discussion.
Thank you. And I was incredibly excited to be asked to introduce this panel today. I head up the UK government's International Forest Unit, which sits between our two ministries of climate on the one hand and of foreign affairs and development cooperation on the other. I've spent 25 years working in the public sector, and one of the challenges that we always face is our tendency to work in silos, to see things in neat, discrete boxes. But we are facing a series of systemic, complex crises, and it is only by identifying and shaping where those crises sit together in nexus that we will be able to find solutions. Conflict and climate are intrinsically linked, and there is an increasing overlap between climate change and conflict. Women are at the front lines. They bear the brunt of the impacts of both climate crisis and conflict, but they also hold the key to many of the solutions. Globally, 75% of refugees or people displaced by conflict are currently living in countries that face high to extreme exposure to climate risks and climate-related hazards. Fragility is deepening across the world, and environmental degradation is driving humanitarian need and undermining development gains that have been hard won. As the video so ably said, conflict and climate change are not gender neutral. These crises are risk multipliers for women and girls, compounding existing inequality by increasing exposure to violence, disrupting livelihoods, and further excluding women from decision-making. And yet, despite being at most at risk for climate impacts, only 0.04%, that's less than 0.5% of climate-related development funding is geared towards supporting climate action by women and girls. Gender-based violence surges after climate shocks, with the steepest increases where conflict has already weakened the rights of women and girls. Climate change and conflict overlap to amplify water stress and food insecurity, both issues that disproportionately impact women and the work that they do day to day. Recognizing gender disparities is essential for lasting peace and for a sustainable recovery. Gender equality is not a side issue or a nice to have. It is fundamental to resilient strategies. Women's participation is demonstrated to strengthen climate and peace outcomes. When women and local communities are involved in climate resilience planning, interventions are not only more equitable, they are more effective and locally grounded. They are more likely to last. Women's leadership in natural resource management has been shown to improve governance, resilience, and conservation outcomes. And when women are meaningfully included in conflict resolution, the resulting peace is more likely to be durable and inclusive. So that is why the UK supports initiatives that embed gender-based violence prevention and women's economic empowerment into climate adaptation strategies. We're committed to ensuring that countries have access to high quality and effective finance for resilience, something which is very much in the backdrop of the negotiation rooms today. That means that finance needs to be tailored to countries' specific circumstances. One resilience strategy that works in one country and one part of the world will not be the same as the one that will work even in its neighbour, let alone in another part of the world. Accessible concessional finance needs to go where it is most needed. But public finance will never be enough on its own. We need to move beyond treating adaptation as a discrete silo of development and instead build it into all of our plans, policies and strategies at every level of investment. And we must put women and girls at the very heart of climate and nature action. There is simply no pathway to delivering the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, unless we put women and girls right at the heart. Embedded in their communities, women's rights organisations deliver effective, sustainable climate solutions and shift entrenched exclusionary norms. People who are used to defying the odds, to contradicting their norms, are the people best placed to break the cycles that got us in this mess in the first place. And women are therefore well placed to lead the charge in the fight against global crises. Since their adoption, the UK has worked hard with our partners to implement the UNFCCC's enhanced Lima work programme on gender and the Gender Action Plan. At COP30, we're urging parties to agree an ambitious new agenda action plan that builds on the progress of the last 5 years. This plan needs to be implementable and to promote inclusive, effective and meaningful participation of women and girls in all their diversity in climate action and relevant decision-making processes. As we move into the next part of today's event, you will hear directly from the panel, from our partners and from grassroots organisations through presentations that bring these issues to life. Their work illustrates both the innovation and the urgency of this nexus of conflict, gender and climate. It offers a message of hope and a path to lasting change. I'd like to thank all of our partners for making time to join us and to share their expertise and experience. I find it is through real-world and practical examples that not only do we learn how to make change, but that it gives us the optimism to move forwards. We look forward to deepening these partnerships to drive forwards our shared goals, deepen collaboration and deliver meaningful impact in the months and years ahead. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Now bear with me while I coordinate this slide to present some of our research as briefly as I can before we head over to the panelists. So as I mentioned before, this research was undertaken by GAGGA. It was led by women environmental and human rights defenders as part of a collaboration with the UK FCDO. And it set out to really conceptualize the nexus through the eyes of those who are actually experiencing it. It covers case studies in Brazil, Burkina Faso, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mozambique, Nigeria, and the Philippines, led by women environmental human rights defenders who undertook a feminist participatory action research. So this methodology enabled them to document and amplify the solutions, strategies, and best practices that are currently being implemented by women-led community-based organizations. The research centers the voices of Indigenous, Black and Brown women and LGBTQI persons from both semi-rural and semi-urban areas. And it also includes policy recommendations. I really encourage you to scan the QR code if you can to read this research, because it also includes policy recommendations to bilateral and philanthropic donors on how they can more meaningfully resource this nexus and provide sustained and flexible support to the women environmental human rights defenders who are addressing this nexus from the kind of a more diverse and localized understanding of conflict than we usually have. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I have my colleague from Burkina Faso who will share the case study from this country, but you can see that we covered these 6 different countries through the research, focusing on women recovering from sexual violence, exploitation, and abuse in the DRC, and also looking at the intersection of conflict with women's leadership in the Philippines, and then across Brazil, Burkina Faso, and Nigeria as well. And I think what the research really showed us is that at the core of the nexus is a story of land. The land that sustains communities, the land that is stolen for corporate profit, and the land that women around the world are fighting to reclaim. Control over land and livelihoods is central to women's resistance against conflict, against climate change, and extractivism. And across the case studies, women fight for ancestral land, food security, and autonomy, while resisting land grabs, intimidation, and forced displacement, often driven by oil and mining companies, agribusinesses, and state-backed interests. Conflict and militarization serve as enforcers of dispossession, with violence used as a means to suppress resistance. And climate change, of course, acts as a compounding force, so deepening inequalities by making food and water security even more precarious. And yet, in the midst of this crisis, as you will hear, women are leading the way, rebuilding, organizing, and demanding justice. I'm going to now hand over to Some Majelia, who is from the Women in Environmental program in Burkina Faso, who's going to share a bit more from the experiences of this research. And then we are going to hear from the rest of the panelists who are going to explore the challenges and best practices for this nexus. But first, I will hand over to Some Majelia to share her experiences. And if you, Some Majelia will be speaking in French, so if you would like to, the translation, please use the headsets available on channel 19.
Allô? OK. Merci bien, distingués panélistes, chers partenaires, bonjour. Aujourd'hui, je vous remercie de porter la voix des personnes qu'on n'a pas l'habitude d'écouter ou qu'on a l'habitude d'écouter peu. Il s'agit des femmes déplacées internes au Burkina Faso qui sont au cœur du système complexe Nexus, conflit, climat et genre. Vous savez, au Burkina Faso, Women Environmental Programme, appelé WEP, œuvre auprès des femmes It's okay. Yeah. Okay. Women Environmental Programme WEP œuvre auprès des femmes pour contribuer à améliorer leurs conditions de vie dans un contexte de changement climatique. Et WEP a essayé, avec ses partenaires, de mener une étude pour comprendre le cheminement de ces femmes déplacées. It's okay. Yeah. OK. Le cheminement de ces femmes déplacées tout au long de leur parcours pour avoir accès aux terres cultivables. Ce sont des femmes généralement productrices et qui ont besoin de terre. Et notre intervention ici, c'est de présenter dans le système Nexus, conflit, climat, genre, comment ces femmes-là n'arrivent pas à avoir accès aux terres et quelles sont les solutions envisagées par web pour venir en aide à ces femmes déplacées. Nous savons que nous avons mené une étude sur ces femmes déplacées et aujourd'hui, je m'en vais vous présenter une étude de cas sur une femme spécifique qui a quitté la zone du Sahel dans le village de Kelbo et qui est descendue jusqu'à Ouagadougou à cause de l'insécurité. Et vous savez bien que l'insécurité au Burkina Faso a permis a contribué à faire déplacer beaucoup de personnes, aussi bien les hommes que les femmes. Mais le cas des femmes déplacées reste vraiment problématique. Et cette femme, depuis Kelbo, a pu rejoindre Ouagadougou. Et au niveau de Ouagadougou, elle a essayé d'avoir accès à la ressource terre pour produire ce qu'elle sait faire. Elle était à Kelbo en tant que productrice maraîchère et elle menait des activités de petits élevages et elle faisait le petit commerce issu des sous-produits de ces cultures maraîchères et du petit élevage. Donc elle était vraiment bien ancrée dans son village natal. Mais une fois déplacée, cette femme a eu des problèmes. On peut dire qu'elle a été déracinée de son lieu et une fois à Ouagadougou, elle était démunie de ses moyens de subsistance. Elle n'avait pas d'activité propre et en tant que productrice, elle était à la recherche de terres cultivables. Et pour cela, dans la zone où elle a migré, les terres sont aussi restées difficiles d'accès parce que là-bas aussi il y a la pression sur les terres. Et les terres sont rares et souvent ça coûte cher. Elle, en tant que femme, est démunie de tout, n'a pas les moyens financiers pour aller acheter les terres, puisqu'on peut acheter les terres. Elle n'en a pas. Elle est démunie aussi de tous des minimums financiers pour aller cultiver Donc, cette femme a eu beaucoup de difficultés et au finish, elle s'est retrouvée dans des camps, dans des fermes, de façon temporaire. Parce que la terre, c'est tout ce qu'elle sait faire. Et donc, à un moment donné, elle s'est retrouvée dans la rue avec ses 4 femmes, c'est une femme de 54 ans, avec ses 4 enfants, dans la rue pour pouvoir subvenir aux besoins de sa petite commune, de sa petite famille, à travers les petites activités de lavage, à travers les petites activités de collecte des cailloux dans la rue. Et cette femme essayait toujours. Et elle a eu tellement de tentatives pour avoir accès à des terres. Elle demandait partout, plus d'une dizaine de tentatives qui sont restées infructueuses. Et finalement, quand elle gagne, les gens, les propriétaires lui disent il y a des terres, mais c'est très éloigné de là où elle est. En tant que femme, elle ne peut pas avoir les moyens pour avoir accès à ces terres-là, très éloignées. Ou alors, quand on veut lui donner la terre, les terres qu'on veut lui donner sont tellement dégradées qu'il lui faut les moyens financiers pour pouvoir produire sur ces terres, notamment les techniques de restauration des terres. Elle n'a pas suffisamment les moyens pour pouvoir faire ça. Et aussi, elle n'a pas de force physique pour aller travailler. Et une fois aussi, on lui a proposé des terres qui sont de superficie tellement petites qu'elle ne peut pas subvenir aux besoins de sa famille. Donc, le problème est devenu un problème majeur. Web ici, dans ses activités d'accompagnement des femmes déplacées pour produire de façon décente, là inclus dans le cas de renforcement des compétences de ces femmes déplacées, en les outillant à travers des formations en agroécologie, à travers des formations de produits forestiers non lignés, à travers les formations de biofertilisants, de production de plants à la pépinière, de plantation. Et c'est à travers ces activités que Web aussi essaie d'outiller ces femmes-là. Et Web a un domaine foncier. Web lui a cédé une partie de ses terres. Et avec cette formation, elle a pu produire non seulement des spéculations ordinaires qu'on a dans nos pays, le niébé, le maïs, le corcorus, ainsi de suite. Et elle a même pu faire le compostage, comme la production du compost, qui est un biofertilisant, qu'elle a essayé de vendre. La récolte de ces maïs, arachides et autres, par saison, elle peut obtenir 100 à 150 000 francs CFA par saison. Et elle arrive à vendre les sacs de compost grâce aux terres, aux champs que Web a mis à sa disposition et à la formation que Web lui a donnée. Au terme de toute cette périspécie, qu'est-ce qu'il faut retenir ici? Nous pouvons retenir que les solutions locales existent pour ces femmes déplacées, ces femmes vulnérables déplacées. Ce sont des femmes qui ne savent faire que la production agricole. Et Web, en leur donnant l'occasion d'avoir accès à la terre, elles arrivent à produire de façon digne. Il faut les accompagner surtout. Et la deuxième chose aussi, c'est qu'il existe des organisations, la société civile, qui arrivent à les encadrer également. Et il nous faut également de l'accompagnement financier pour pouvoir aider ces femmes déplacées-là à pouvoir produire dignement et à devenir autonomes économiquement. Donc, en résumé, il y a aussi l'État. L'État fait beaucoup envers ces femmes déplacées. Et l'État arrive à les loger, à les fournir le nécessaire. Mais ça demeure et ça reste et ça demeure toujours insuffisant. Il faut l'appui de la société civile. La société civile, c'est vrai, mais l'État doit intégrer aussi systématiquement la prise en compte de ces femmes déplacées-là dans les aides climat humanitaires pour que ces femmes productrices puissent aussi produire de façon décente et de façon durable. Et c'est ça de façon durable, avec des investissements durables et être autonome économiquement. Voilà ce que je peux dire. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much for these reflections and for sharing the experiences from the research, but specifically the challenges facing women and their organizations, civil society organizations in Burkina Faso. I'm now going to pass to my colleague Wanan, who is Executive Director at Climate Watch Thailand, who will share some reflections from Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here and sharing some of the stories and some of the work that we have been doing in Thailand and also in the Mekong countries, namely Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Of course, the three things cannot be separated when you are looking at it: gender, conflict, and climate change. In our work, we are focusing more on the climate issues. And when we are looking at the climate issue, and then it's also related as well to the location and geographical location of where you are going and where they are located and where they are having their lives and their culture and their livelihoods. And so all of these have been interrelated. And since it have its own local specific context, then the question to you, if your government or your state or any donors are trying to do some intervention on climate actions or building resilience, how can you sit in the room and do it from the central body? Because those are really, really specific contexts, especially when you are talking about the adaptation. So let me give some examples. So our communities, both the women groups and also the gender diverse, let me call them queer, the queer communities, because there's a long names of them, LGBTIQ, I will never be able to address them all, yeah? Never finish. And then I get that, they are my teacher as well, and then they call me, Wanan, you better use one word, queer. Okay, so that's very easy. So the gender, the women and also the queer people, they are hardly impacted as well, not just only by the impacts of climate change. In general, the situation is already vulnerable, socially vulnerable because of the political and the social construct And that is the first thing. When impacts of climate change are there, then they are the ones suffering even more than the normal people. Why? Because women, for example, they have to do the work in the household, and that is unpaid care work. They have no time to go out to associate with other policy discussions, to be aware of when the war would be coming, when the gunshot would be starting, and when the warning of the disaster would be happening. So that's how the women don't really have the access to the information. And then, what about the people with the gender diverse, like queer? So when the impacts of climate change, like drought or floods are coming, so they are the very, very last one who gets the support. So if I'm putting like the people lining up for the support, yeah, you get the men who are really the head of the household getting the survival package. And then you have the women who are really the next one. And then you have the, the gay, for example. So those who are really the queer would be the very, very last one to get the survival package. Why? Because they are branded as, in Thai, it is bad luck. You are the one causing the extreme climatic events. You are the one causing all the damages and the loss because of your gender expression. So those are the things. And then the last one that they are getting the impact is the solutions of the climate actions. So namely in terms of the using the geothermal in the forested area. Geothermal is also considered as renewable sources of energy. But then when it's there in the very well-protected area, so these communities and these people would need to be removed out of the forested areas for the climate action, which is geothermal as renewable sources of energy. So these are really a new trend. And also in terms of the solar farming, so these people would also be removed out of the forest and out of the very remoted area because they want to build a big solar farms. So that is also under the name of like the climate action and solutions that are also putting the impacts onto these vulnerable communities. One clear example on another example is on the informal workers. Women in the informal workers, say the Thai Cambodian, not in terms of like the conflict or whatever political it is in terms of the Thailand and Cambodian conflicts. But if you're looking at those, along the border of these two countries, trades are already there. Community are doing trades between each other. And when the conflict started and still going on, women have to flee from that particular areas and that location to somewhere else. And the shelter that they will be there is not really designed and is not really friendly to different gendered identities of the people who have to flee from the conflict area. And also those who have been doing the trading between the border, they got so badly impacted as well. People from the other country would need to go back to their country because it has created emotional things in terms of the fight and also the gunfights between the two countries. When they get back to their home country, then there has been no job for them. So what should they do? So they enter into the city and also entering in terms of like trying to become homelessness as well because there's no money and no job for them because they are depending on the work informally between the border and selling stuff at the border. So the conflict, this kind of traditional conflict like militarism and also war have also created the disparity between the border trades of the two countries as well. So it's not just only that the women in the deep south of Thailand that has already a long conflict in terms of the militarism as well. Women staying at home, they have to be to living with fear because they don't know when the surveillance and also the policemen or the military would come into their house. And also, if there's the conflict has getting into very intensifying, that would set a curfews. So that means setting the curfews, then you have to go out, you have the time limit of going out and getting back home. And you have the community forest, and normally women would get into the community forest in the early morning to find food to get food from the forest area. How are you getting on it? Because the curfew hasn't started yet. And then also in the evening, you might want to get some protein from the community forest, like getting frogs, getting some of the, some kind of the food. But it comes, and those food comes only in the evening after the sunset. But then you cannot go because of the curfew. So, I mean, and then when you have floods, and then you have no food at all. So you really have to depend on the food outside, then you are paying as well. So that becomes kind of a very, I don't know, tenfold of burdens among the women, especially during the time of the climate impacts and also the time of the military conflict. So from these cases, then we have drawn our understanding together with the women in the communities, different locations as well. So it's really to look at, if you want to support or to get the support and to build the network of the women in this area. So it's really need to have a very collective getting together among the women within that particular location. And then they have to discuss in terms of how are they going to take care of each other first, rather than looking at what would be coming from the outside community. So that becomes the thing that the women really want to do and to get the support in terms of getting together with a collective voice and also trying to do things together to support each other, which to us it is they are really in solidarity, and that has been under the what is called caring society, caring of the group. So what they are trying to do is also helping each other within the community, small but very powerful. They build their own child care so that women are free from the unpaid care work within the household. So if you have the center of caring for children, then women could go out and get some more information and be able to engage in the policy discussion. But if there's no care center for that, then women would have to take their children along with them or even staying at home and have no information on that. So that's part of the things that women really have come up in terms of the collective action and collective recommendations. And also, it's also good that you have toilets, for example, the restrooms that are really along the very near to the communities and the shelter. Some of our women have to hold things not to go to the toilet for over 6 hours because it's not safe to go there because there's no one else. There are already like militaries around. How can they go there alone, for example? So holding that, then it has proved that some of them has got some infectors in the sexual reproductive health as well. So that really have put more stress into the women's livelihoods as well. So for us and the women in the community in this area, so it's the collective one and the caring among each other first. And it would be nice to also showcases how they are doing it within their own community, to expand it to other communities as well. So that would become a practice. And in terms of the policy thing, the policy would need to address all of these at the local area, specific to the location context and specific to different types of the women. So that means in putting the intersectionality lens into it as well. So with that, I'll stop my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanan. And I think you really help us take this concept of the nexus from the abstract into the actual very kind of real experiences. You kind of bring it to life for us so we can imagine those kind of multifaceted struggles that these women and communities are actually facing. So thank you. And now I'm going to hand to Victoria Fernandez Almeida, who is the coordinator at Andes, which is an organization of human rights lawyers in Argentina. So I'm going to hand over, let me get this correct this time, but over to Victoria. And Victoria will speak in Spanish. And Ashley from Equality Fund, who's here, will very kindly share a translation back with the room because it won't be on the headset this time.
Bueno, buenos días a todos y todas. Muchas gracias por este espacio. Gracias a quienes han organizado, Mama Cash, Equality Fund, y que nos parece un espacio de suma importancia ante esta policrisis que estamos viviendo, donde tenemos crisis democráticas, crisis climáticas, crisis del multilateralismo. Qué importante poder explorar los nexos entre conflicto, género y cambio climático, ¿no?
So she says, good morning, everybody. Thank you for this space. Thank you to GAGGA, to Mama Cash, to the FCDO Pavilion for allowing her to be here. This is a very important discussion for us to have, particularly looking at the nexus, all of the different conflicts and crises that we're confronting, democratic crises, the climate crisis, and the crisis of increasing militarization.
Bueno, yo vengo representando una organización que trabaja desde una perspectiva de derechos humanos, una organización feminista, de abogados, abogadas y de otras disciplinas también, pero nació como de abogados y abogadas. Trabajamos en 3 provincias del norte de Argentina, Tucumán, Salta y Jujuy. Trabajamos con mujeres, con niñeces, con comunidades indígenas, migrantes, con personas privadas de la libertad, en esos 3 lugares del norte de Argentina desde una perspectiva regional.
So I am here today representing an organization called Andes. We are an organization based in northern Argentina that is a human rights-based organization and a feminist organization that works in 3 territories in northern Argentina, Tucumán, Salta, and Jujuy. And we work with women and communities, indigenous communities, women that are experiencing violence, people that are deprived of liberty, and we work from a rights-based and legal perspective.
En estos territorios hemos podido observar los impactos del cambio climático en zonas tanto más urbanizadas como rurales o semirurales por la diversidad de colectivos con los que trabajamos. Particularmente hemos observado en las áreas rurales el impacto de las inundaciones y los costos en la salud de la población, la proliferación de enfermedades como el dengue y el Zika en las áreas urbanas y cómo la proliferación de estas enfermedades ha ocasionado una sobrecarga de cuidados y mayor número de mujeres muertas a causa del dengue, producto de la sobrecarga de cuidado y de la detección tardía de la enfermedad, porque justamente son ellas quienes cuidan a quienes están enfermos en sus casas y en sus familias. Entonces la detección es tardía y la detección tardía de por ejemplo, el dengue y el Zika ha ocasionado un mayor número de muertes de mujeres que está constatado a través de pedidos de información pública que hemos hecho a los gobiernos provinciales.
So they work with communities both in rural and semi-urban zones, and they've noted the impacts of climate change across all of these different zones in terms of droughts, extreme flooding, but another dimension that impacts women specifically is health impacts of climate change. So there's been a sharp increase in cases of dengue, of Zika, and women are disproportionately suffering from these illnesses. And this is also in large part because women are caretakers and they take care of those in their households who are sick. And so they're often exposed to all of these illnesses. And this is coming from information from provincial that's been collected by their provincial governments.
Y en las áreas rurales en las que trabajamos, donde son la mayoría habitadas por comunidades indígenas, hemos observado y estamos trabajando sobre procesos de extractivismo. Lo que ocurre en estos lugares es que se extraen minerales como el litio, cobalto, tierras raras, níquel, plomo, y la minería lo que ocasiona en estos lugares, que son geografías áridas en zonas de altura, estamos hablando de más de 3.500 metros sobre el nivel del mar, es una escasez hídrica. Esto ha provocado que las poblaciones locales se movilicen desde las áreas rurales a donde estaban a las poblaciones semirurales, a las ciudades semirurales más cercanas. el auge de la extracción del litio ha ocasionado serios conflictos y particularmente ha generado en el año 2023 una reforma constitucional.
So they also work with rural communities, and in the rural communities, it's majority indigenous populations. And in these communities, there is conflict generated around extraction of different minerals. And so the minerals coming from these communities are lithium, cobalt, copper. And as extractive companies and mining companies encroach upon their lands, and because of the results of climate change, people are forced to move to more urban areas, leaving their indigenous and ancestral homes. And in particular, the extraction of lithium has become problematic in these communities and has generated a lot of conflict, specifically in 2023, leading to constitutional reform in that province.
Esta reforma constitucional ha generado una normativa que blinda en materia fiscal las ganancias de las empresas que operan en torno a la minería. También lo que ha hecho es incorporar un articulado específico que criminaliza el derecho a la protesta y ha generado una mayor brecha entre en la aplicación de normativa protectoria en materia de tierras rurales y de comunidades indígenas. Y esta reforma constitucional ha ocasionado en su momento una movilización en el territorio donde se ha detenido en 2 fechas que han sido las más significativas, pero después la provincia ha sido las rutas cortadas por las comunidades. El reclamo ha ocasionado aproximadamente 100 detenciones, donde el Estado provincial ha utilizado camionetas sin patentes, pero con logo de empresas, para detener a todas las personas que estaban alrededor de la legislatura y alrededor de los cortes de ruta, personas que estaban manifestándose y personas que simplemente estaban transitando. Por otro lado,
so this constitutional reform incorporated a number of articles that were detrimental and created conflict in the communities. One of them was about the selling the rights to the profits from the mines to these corporations. But another important one was an article that was added to the Constitution that actually criminalized protest. And when the constitutional reform was about to pass, there was a massive mobilization in these communities, and over 100 land defenders were arrested. And she noted that during these arrests and during the police response and the militarized response to these protests, the province was using trucks without license plates that couldn't be identified, but had the corporate logos of the mining companies on the trucks to make the arrests and to take people into custody.
Y otras 200 personas, entre ellas la mitad de mujeres, han sido criminalizadas a partir de la aplicación de penas pecuniarias de un código contravencional, solamente por salir a manifestarse, porque la norma dice que quien salga a manifestarse, quien ocupe el espacio público, va a ser sancionado.
So a number of land defenders, and the majority of them women, have also been penalized because of these laws that are criminalizing protests. And it's not just people who are protesting, but anybody that has been leaving their houses in the communities, because the law says that anybody who's in public spaces can be arrested or penalized for participating in any of these activities.
Y estos retrocesos normativos en materia de tierras, de derechos sociales, también ha generado amenazas en torno a las políticas de género y un desfinanciamiento de las políticas de género y de cuidados particularmente. Estas políticas provinciales en los últimos 2 años se han hecho eco a nivel nacional. Todo lo que pasaba en las provincias ha sido aplicado o replicado por el actual gobierno con claros signos autoritarios que tenemos, que es el gobierno de Javier Milei.
And so the backsliding in terms of women's rights, in terms of the rights of political participation that have happened in the provinces that they work, have also had clear implications in terms of the policies on a national level. And these policies that criminalize protesters and have been impacting women and land defenders are now being replicated on a national level by the federal government that has clear signs of authoritarian tendencies of Javier Milei.
Sí, ante esto, desde la organización hemos trabajado en materia de fortalecimiento en materia de derechos, lo que implica que las comunidades puedan apropiarse de ciertas herramientas legales que están a su alcance, y cuando se necesita intervención legal intervenimos, pero eso ha generado que, por ejemplo, las comunidades puedan utilizar habeas corpus cuando hay detenciones, también que conozcan el proceso de los estudios de impacto ambiental y sepan cuándo intervenir y participar. También cuando se precisa acompañamiento se lo hace, pero hay instancias que no es necesario el acompañamiento, no es legal, de alguien que sea abogado o abogada. Después también este fortalecimiento se ha realizado en materia de violencia de género. Entonces hay muchas herramientas y muchos organismos que las mujeres en las diversas zonas han sabido utilizar, han aprendido a utilizar y a generar ahí ciertas iniciativas locales.
So her organization helps support communities to know their legal rights in terms of the tools that they can access to fight against the different impositions on their rights of the extractive companies, of mining companies. As an organization of lawyers, they're also available to provide legal support and accompaniment to people who have court cases, people who have been penalized. And they also provide capacity building in terms of helping communities understand the contents of the environmental impact studies that are being done by mining and extractive companies in the region, and then accessing the tools that they need to use that information to defend the rights of their land and their territories. There are many cases where people don't necessarily need the accompaniment of somebody who is actually a lawyer, but they have a lot of people within the organization that do different things, and by helping these communities understand their rights and have access to the information and the tools available to them, it's also improving the ways that communities can respond to these different conflicts.
Y otra de las herramientas que utilizamos también es la investigación participativa para documentar todas estas vulneraciones en materia de derechos desde una perspectiva de género y desde una y particularmente con las niñeces estamos desarrollando trabajo en áreas urbanas donde ellos identifican las afectaciones que existen en torno a la infraestructura local, que particularmente esta zona donde estamos trabajando es una zona donde se inunda con frecuencia y donde las olas de calor son las temperaturas de esas zonas son igual de altas que las de Belén. Y por último trabajamos con el litigio estratégico, que es nuestra herramienta más, si se quiere, que trata de generar un impacto mayor, y ahí estamos actualmente en procesos de juzgamiento de actores empresarios en causas de complicidad empresarial durante la última dictadura militar. También llevamos adelante los procesos particulares de criminalización durante el proceso de reforma y 2 amparos en contra del proceso de reforma por ausencia de la consulta libre previa informada, y otra contra un decreto que posibilita que la consulta libre previa informada la desarrollen las empresas.
Other pieces of the work that they do are to help people document the environmental degradation that's happening in their communities. They particularly work with youth in urban areas to document what's going on. There often is heavy flooding and very, very high temperatures because of climate change. It gets equally as hot in the regions where they work as it has been here in Belém. And one of the other tools that they use is strategic litigation, and so supporting communities to fight back against the constitutional reform, but also other policies that are being put into place, and also to fight against the concessions that mining and extractive corporations are getting based on the principles of free, prior, and informed consent for the indigenous communities where these extractive companies are trying to work.
Espero se haya entendido. Vengo en representación de una organización que tiene muchas líneas de trabajo interconectadas, entonces es mucho el trabajo que hacemos desde diferentes líneas y con diferentes colectivos.
So she says that's it. She hopes it was understandable, and she comes from an organization that has various different interconnected lines of work, and so it's all related to this nexus that we're speaking about, and also for my part, if anything wasn't clear, it was probably my fault with a bad translation. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, both of you, and Victoria, really, for sharing the perspective from your organization in Argentina. And now we're going to have a different perspective on the panel from Lana, who is in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Denmark. She's Chief Advisor on Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights in the Department for Multilateral Cooperation and Policy. So, Lena, great to hear a perspective from a government on this.
Thank you so. Is it on? Yeah. Thank you so much. It's always tough being in the end, and after these very interesting and on the hands-on experiences, it's going to be a little bit more boring now from my perspective. I could basically, I was about to say, repeat what Maggie said in the beginning, but with opposite sign in front, because I come from gender equality and sexual and reproductive health and rights side. So I'm not integrating gender into anything. Now we are in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs trying to integrate a climate perspective into the work that we do. Most people here at the COP come from the climate side and thinking gender. I'm coming from the gender side, now having to think gender. So but it shows how siloed it has been, and that hopefully we are on our way to a more integrated approach. Denmark is not, we are not, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we don't implement. We work at the normative side in the UN, at negotiating the gap here, and working in the Security Council, where both women, peace and security, but also climate effects on security is priorities for Denmark. And then we support frontline organizations. And from my perspective, it has mostly been supporting gender equality organizations, UN, like UNFPA and UN Women, but also frontline service providers of sexual and reproductive health and rights, like the International Planned Parenthood Federation and MSI, Reproductive Choices, Amplified Change, Population Council, and Danish NGOs also doing that. And now I'm also happy to say that our new addition to my portfolio is our now partnership with GAGGA. So we're very happy about that. But it has been interesting, you could say, process for us. Because to be honest with you here, it has been, it's relatively new trying to get climate perspective into my portfolio. So, which is why we actually just 2 years ago had a study made of the interlinkages between gender equality, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and climate change. We also did one on education and climate change, because for us, we couldn't really get a grab on what was happening out there from the gender perspective. And what was already, we didn't want to duplicate, and we wanted to get a hold of what was happening. And it of course was very clear of the interlinkages, and I think we've heard them here today. So I don't have to repeat. The study is on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, and I can also share it with Leah, and then you can contact if you are interested. But that showed very clearly what the interlinkages and that we couldn't look away from that. So we were thinking, what can we do? I mean, many of our partners have also started looking more at the interlinkages between, in my case, service delivery of sexual and reproductive health services and climate change, and trying to make strategies of it, and we discuss it with them. But I just last July came home after 4 years in Tanzania, where I was posted, but from a health and gender perspective, and didn't think much of the climate perspective until I realized and afterthought thinking that all our partners on the front lines, they're already doing this. They might not articulate it as now we are doing gender transformative approaches, or now we might having I don't know, but gender financing angle or something like that. But they're doing it every day because they can see their environments chasing floodings that are in getting rid of bridges that was the only access to clinics, health clinics. The temperatures rising that we just heard about that does creates a new health and epidemic picture. We saw it during the COVID, how that isolates people and gender-based violence increased. I mean, so all these things, and you also talked about the unpaid care work, that women are the ones looking after the elderly, the people with disabilities, the children who have difficulty. They might be last in the queue but they're also the one who moves, who doesn't have the biggest mobility. So when climate strikes and there's a crisis, it's difficult to get the elderly away from there. So they often have to stay back, and so I sort of realized that they're already doing it on the ground. What we need to do as Denmark is to create the framework for them to get funding and get the negotiation, you could say, the resolutions and the gap, the gender action plans and stuff, for them to be able to carry out their work and get their voices heard. So this is, you could say, how we try to get the climate perspective into our work as well at the ground. So yeah, so I think that I will leave it at that for now. I think I'm just happy to be here and happy to listen to all the much more interesting stories than what I do in an office in Copenhagen or in a negotiation room in New York. So thank you so much to all three of you for sharing your perspective. It's really interesting for me. Thank you.
So I just want to pose a question to you now, and I've done some pretty poor timekeeping because I was interested in your stories. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes each to respond, if it's possible. So we know that despite this kind of critical work and the importance of these challenges at this nexus, and the efforts that are being led globally by Women for Peace, for gender and climate justice, this work is currently undermined by shrinking gender equality budgets globally, incoherence on foreign policy, and still inadequate climate finance commitments. So the question I want to pose to you is that in this context of reduced official development assistance and shrinking space for civil society, what is really needed now to support and resource the work of women's rights organizations at this nexus? And I guess maybe, Lena, for you as policymakers and funders, what can be done? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes each. I will try and time keep, and I will hand over Victoria to you first to respond to the question, if that's okay. And then we can follow after with Sami Majalia, Wanan, and then Lena. Thank you.
Bueno, a los tomadores de decisión y a los financiadores, 3 puntos principalmente. Una que es apoyar los procesos de movilización legal para fortalecer nuestras democracias. Creemos que la movilización social y legal es necesaria para fortalecer las democracias y que los autoritarismos no tomen los poderes. Exactamente, evitar que los autoritarismos coopten el poder. Y otro punto sería el financiamiento directo a organizaciones en territorio. Creemos que es necesario fortalecer los lazos sociales dentro de las comunidades, que muchas veces se ve quebrantada por las crisis económicas y climáticas, lo que provoca movilización y migración de población. Entonces es muy importante sostener a las personas que viven en los territorios, y también es necesario fortalecer y financiar a los defensores de humanos, de derechos humanos, principalmente porque son un soporte que también sufre criminalización por parte de los gobiernos y que su labor muchas veces queda un poco invisibilizada porque son quienes conectan las luchas locales con los tomadores de decisión, o que también acompañan los procesos, principalmente acompañan los procesos de criminalización ante gobiernos autoritarios que reprimen la protesta y y que no son permeables a incidencia y a llegar a un diálogo con las comunidades locales.
So to policymakers and to funders, she has three main points. The first is to support communities and strengthen organizing for democracy. We're in a moment where authoritarianism is rising, and so supporting mobilizations and organization to promote democracy, prevent authoritarianism from taking power is super important. Secondly, direct funding to communities that are at the front lines. Climate change is provoking migration and people leaving their original territories and lands. And so by supporting communities directly in terms of their human rights and their ability to stay in their communities is super important. Lastly, support and strengthening for human rights defenders because they are the ones who are criminalized and often invisibilized in these processes, and people who suffer violence because of authoritarian repression and the infringing on rights in terms of rights to protest, rights to organize, and so for funders and policymakers to also directly support land and human rights defenders.
Allô? OK. Nous savons au niveau de la société civile, nous savons que les financements sont en train de s'amenuiser. Il y a une forte réduction des financements de nos activités. Ce que nous voulons en tant que société civile, organisation féminine, nous voulons un financement vraiment à l'interne. D'abord, au niveau du fonds vert, des fonds globaux, le fonds vert climat par exemple, il faut alléger l'accès aux ressources là par ces organisations de femmes. Parce que les critères pour avoir accès à ces fonds-là sont des critères vraiment difficiles. Les femmes n'ont pas accès. Et en plus de ça, il y a des intermédiaires internationaux qui font que l'accès doit être direct entre ces fonds et les organisations de société civile et puis les femmes. Ça, c'est un point très important. Deuxième point, le financement de compensation de crédit carbone. Par exemple, nous, au niveau des femmes, nous avons remarqué dans notre zone sahélienne que les femmes travaillent beaucoup plus dans des questions de reboisement, de solar cookers, de fours solaires, de restauration naturelle assistée, de régénération naturelle assistée. Ce sont des activités qui ont un impact très fort climatique. Et qui dit ces activités dit aussi qu'on intervient dans le domaine de l'atténuation, d'adaptation et de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Qui dit réduction des gaz de l'émission des gaz à effet de serre dit aussi vraiment réduction de la production de bois d'énergie. Elles ont besoin d'une récompense. Il faut les récompenser de façon financière. Donc, notre appel, c'est que le financement crédit carbone s'oriente vers ces femmes-là. Parce que leur travail quotidien, c'est travailler à réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Mais elles ne sont pas récompensées. Juste reconnaître ça et financer les activités, et ça permettra pour elles de travailler normalement et à vraiment être des ambassadrices de l'action climatique dans notre zone. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. So what I'm going to be saying this, many people have been hearing it. Finance is not enough now. We need to scale up the finance, pay up and pay up. And we also need to, who really gets the direct access to the climate finance is not the women on the ground. And also, do we really need to track the climate finance? Yes, it's really needed to track the climate finance of who really gets the direct access. But that is not what I am going to say now. I think it's the way that I am here is more because of we've been talking to the people on the ground, especially women. Women, as like you said, and I thank you so much for recognizing that. Women are already struggling every day on their daily life. Do they know that it's because of the impacts of climate change? No. Do they know that the impacts of climate change are caused by the global north? No. Do they know about 1.5? No. But their life and their realities are living on the ground. So they could observe what has been changing. So how are we making sure and trying to facilitate that women and our women realize that? So that is very big challenge as well. It's not like us coming to tell them, let's talk about this 1.5. No, it's not the way. They are already having their own knowledge and understanding, but how to link it to the women on the ground. And also when you're talking about the innovations or initiatives on the ground, women observe the changes to the climate. Then they change a bit of their cropping species. They know it. Do they know that it is the solutions? No, that's not their language. They are doing it because they want to survive. And I think it's CSOs and other institutions have no right to extract those from them. How are we making them realizing those? And together with them build stories, powerful stories from the women. And those stories would belong to the women, owned by the women. And once you have all those stories and women realizing that they are the one who are leading the way, then we have the responsibility to provide the space for them to speak. Otherwise, it will be there within the community. So how are we making sure that they are speaking up? So we need to provide all the support for them to speak up, providing the spaces, even though the very small space in the communities, to talk and dialogue with the local governments, to talk to different CSOs. So that is the space that I think we really need the support in order to bring more women to come up and to speak up. And that is the way that they are reclaiming that space from the male dominant movements or the government. And also with that, then you could also see the beauty of when women are together just like this, we build a very powerful movement. The movement could also go on and then with understanding. And then I think it might be like very ideal, but we really want to see more movement from the ground with continual support, regular support, of course. Yeah, so that women could speak up, and also we could also have a very powerful stories from the ground up. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. No, from a government perspective, I can proudly say that Denmark has not reduced our development cooperation. And also both climate, gender equality, LGBTQI, human rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights are all priorities in the new Danish strategy for development cooperation who came out this summer. So which gives us a good interlinkage to keep on doing what we are doing. But one thing that is also in our strategy is to look at innovative financing, because if we have to be honest, I mean, I think the development aid will only go one way, unfortunately, and it's not up as the climate is now. So innovative financing, and I don't know it from a climate finance perspective, because since I'm mainly working in health and gender equality, but there's many good initiatives trying to find financing from elsewhere, which might also look into and probably is looking into from a climate side. And then I know that Denmark has a gender focus both in our strategy with the Green Climate Fund and with the Adaptation Fund. And I think it's just maybe up to me to talk to my colleagues who's in charge of those to actually do the tracking, as you said, of how they are using this money. So I think that would be it. I think we don't have a future if we don't go into this together. So yeah, I saw over in the Indian pavilion it said choose life, and that of course is for me, from a sexual and reproductive health and lives issue, a little bit different. But I think here from a climate perspective I can vouch for that as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes for a Q&A or a bit of a sharing from the audience, as we'll hand the mic around. And it would be great to hear either something from your experience at the Nexus, or maybe something on best practices for how to approach this Nexus from a policy and financing perspective. So does anybody want to share first?
So fine. Thank you so much for this presentation. I would like to try to start by thanking you all for what you presented this morning. This is very important for us, and I know that for the lady from Denmark, Lena, yeah, I know that Denmark is a country where the human rights is very, very well respected. This I know that because I worked with them 10 years. And what I would like to emphasize here is that you write something very important. It is the right of children and also disability people. Now we are trying during negotiation to introduce these issues, because when we talk about gender, sometimes we just talk about gender and youth, women and youth. We do not remember that children are also the most affected by climate change issues, and also disabilities people. This is a kind of advocacy for all of us here, to make sure that when we are negotiating in negotiation room, we need to pay attention to these people, and also when we are designing our project, to make sure that we take them into account. This is we help to have climate justice also. Thank you so much. And I do appreciate very well what you presented about women for using toilet. Sometimes they couldn't go to toilet because they do not have a separate toilet and so on, and it can be impacted their health. This also is something which is well known. Even in our countries, we are also experiencing this kind of issues. Sometimes women do not want to go to toilet because they don't know if they will be arrested. And then sometimes there are work related to toilets work, maybe cleaning or the processing of waste related to toilet. They cannot be involved because they will be discriminated and so on. So we need definitely to raise their voice, because it is very important. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I think that you also present something very important about mining. Thank you so much for that. We need to keep up. The Majelia, we are in the same organization, because I'm also from Women Environmental Program. So I would like also to echo what she has already said. Thank you so much.
No, but it is also, I mean, even though we really like gender equality, there are some physical things for women like and girls for their monthly period, which also the menstrual poverty that is important also in a climate perspective. Yeah.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, great. I wasn't sure. Thank you, ladies. I really enjoyed that panel. Thank you for all your engagement. My name is Bernadette Sexton. I'm CEO of Red Ore. We're a humanitarian and development training, engineering and emergencies. It really resonated when you were talking about things like infrastructure and the impacts of gender-based violence on sexual and reproductive health rights, etc. Just to give one example, we were working in a refugee community in Uganda, and one of our members focused on providing cooking stoves that were based on renewables, which provided security where women and girls did not have to go out and try to get material to start a fire. And that has a very practical impact. A lot of what we're talking about here is in relation to women having access to decision making, being part of the participatory mechanism, being engaged in policies around national adaptation planning, and financing actually reaching either female-led organizations or where gender is really mainstreamed across decision making. Do you have thoughts on how, and Lena, I suppose in particular for yourself, how we can do more of that so it's really getting to where it needs to go to? Thank you again.
Thank you very much to the panel. Is that good enough? My name is Lungi Sauna. I come from South Africa. I'm with the Rural Women Assembly. My questions are very much reflective as I'm listening to you, because what you've shared here, it resonates with a number of stories and issues that impact women at grassroots level. So one of the critical things that I'm hearing, it's a reflection. This thing of women doing care work and not being paid for. I am hearing a sound of a campaign that needs to be brought to the fore from the ground by feminists and by women to fight for this notion of unpaid care work. That's my first reflection. The second reflection is on the right to say no, or the free prior informed consent, whereby corporations are grabbing land, are moving, displacing communities, deforestation that happens. And it's a question, what do we do? Where are the corporate impunities? Because I thought when the question was asked of where should the money be coming from, we should also be pushing for corporate impunities, that they should pay back to those communities, to support those communities when the deforestation happens and the displacement happens. So maybe in South Africa we have a campaign that we run, which is called the Right to Say No, where one of the communities which lived in a coastal area where oil was found, where these communities had fisher women who were living and had their livelihood coming from the ocean, were forcibly removed, and they took the company to court. So there is a litigation, and the case has gone to the highest court in the country. So we're hoping that they will win, and the corporations will pay. So those are some of my points, but also I'm hearing the issues of indigenous communities being moved. There are many declarations signed by many countries, the UN DRIP, the UN DROP, and the UN binding treaties. How can we push for these policies to be implemented at local, national level, regional level, globally? Thank you.
Respecto a esto último, sí, respecto a esto último, quizás nosotros ensayamos diferentes escalas a la hora de los litigios y de los organismos que pueden ayudar. A nivel provincial y nacional son los más difíciles de incidir y de generar algún tipo de jurisprudencia, pero también están los sistemas regionales como el sistema interamericano, que lo que hacen es posicionar una narrativa y estándares de derechos humanos que nos parecen muy importantes, pero también estamos tratando de ensayar litigios transnacionales a partir de fueros de atracción entre casas matrices, o sea, filiales de las casas matrices de las empresas. Pero para eso también se necesitan recursos, porque un litigio transnacional implica una movilización de recursos legales y de articulación con organizaciones que litiguen en otros países que son escasos. Pero creo que el horizonte en este punto, aparte de la utilización de los sistemas regionales y los sistemas de Naciones Unidas, son los litigios transnacionales con normativa de los países donde están las casas matrices de diferentes empresas.
So she's saying it's really important, and that litigation at the provincial and national levels can be really challenging, especially because there's not necessarily the legal jurisprudence to take those companies to court. At her organization, and it is really important, the regional mechanisms like the Inter-American courts, where they've brought some cases. But in her perspective, the next step is transnational litigation, and so being able to take court cases to the headquarters of these mining companies and corporations, so that the legal cases can be tried based on the legislation in those countries. But she said that's also much more challenging because it requires a much broader mobilization of resources, financing, legal resourcing that isn't necessarily always available, that's harder to coordinate, that there's not necessarily funding for. But that in her perspective, that transnational litigation is kind of the next step to support.
Is this what? Yeah, it is. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us. I think what we've really heard today is that the work of women environmental human rights defenders is rooted in collective strength, that they're forging solutions that challenge the dominant paradigms of extractivism and exploitation. And I think what we're also hearing again and again is surrounding financing, that it's not enough to just understand that these struggles are connected, but this really requires urgent shifts in funding structures to support the kind of transformative and locally led action that we've heard about today, and to ensure that these organizations have the kind of flexible, adequate resources they need to carry out their work, but also to be shaping policies in climate finance. So we talk about long-term, sustainable, flexible core funding so that these organizations can scale up their strategies, adapt to crisis and climate change, and drive the kind of solutions that are really leading to stability and security. And I think those perspectives were shared today. We know we're in a time where funding is scarce and perhaps set to be even scarcer, and we know that there is this shrinking of civic space that we're facing. So I think together we need to be working to champion these perspectives in spaces like COP, and then also working with bilaterals and philanthropic donors to really see how we can scale up the kind of financing that's needed to reach these women, environmental human rights defenders and community-based organizations. To trust them, to support them, and acknowledge that this is really the most effective way of responding to the nexus that we've discussed today. So a huge thank you to my colleagues at GAGGA, of course, to the UK for hosting us in their pavilion and for the ongoing collaboration. Also to Equality Fund, who we've worked with on many events like this, but most importantly to the speakers on the stage who did such a great job, and really grateful for you taking the time to share your perspective. So thank you for joining us, and enjoy your last couple of days at COP.